as millions mourn the deaths of Kobe and Gianna Bryant and those who died with them, we think about life's brevity, uncertainty, and legacy.
A time for reflection at the Senate impeachment trial. Sports legend Kobe Bryant was remembered during the opening prayer today. Well, the White House, a legal team, spent a second day working to poke holes in the case against President Trump.
But new revelations contained in a manuscript from former National Security Advisor John Bolton could threaten the defense strategy. KCAL 9's Randy Page joins us now to explain why. Randy?
What a crazy and unexpected twist to this whole saga. You may have heard former National Security Advisor John Bolton reportedly saying Rudy Giuliani is a hand grenade and is going to blow everybody up. Well, today Bolton threw a hand grenade of his own, it appears, into the middle of the Senate impeachment trial. And we're told Republican senators are busy trying to figure out what to do with the pieces. The president's defense team may have been wearing poker faces as they walked into the Senate chamber this morning, but the New York Times reports behind closed doors, they were singularly focused on one man who hasn't appeared inside the Senate chamber yet. The man described by a CNN anchor today as the big white mustache in the room, former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton.
I'm just going to explain why I'm not going to talk to you.
Last night, the New York Times reported a manuscript of Bolton's soon-to-be-released book, The Room Where It Happened, includes an account of a conversation between President Trump and Bolton, which contradicts a principal foundation of the president's defense.
There is simply no evidence anywhere that President Trump ever linked security assistance to any investigations.
Actually, the evidence came right out of the president's mouth, according to Bolton's first-hand account. The Times reports President Trump told his national security advisor in August that he wanted to continue freezing $391 million in security assistance until officials there helped with investigations into Democrats, including the Bidens. Today, the president said, don't believe it.
I haven't seen a manuscript, but I can tell you nothing was ever said to John Bolton, but I have not seen a manuscript. I guess he's writing a book. I have not seen it.
On Fox News tonight, California Congressman and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said,
you have all the facts you need. This does not hold ground. The American public wants us to move on.
But Utah Republican Senator Mitt Romney begs to differ.
It's increasingly likely that other Republicans will join those of us who think we should hear from John Bolton.
This is as close as the president's attorneys came to responding to Bolton's bombshell.
We deal with transcript evidence. We deal with publicly available information. We do not deal with speculation, allegations that are not based on evidentiary standards at all.
In the second day of their defense presentation, former independent counsel and lead prosecutor in the Clinton impeachment trial, Ken Starr, told Senate jurors no crime was committed and the impeachment of Donald Trump is so flawed and illegitimate, it's a danger to the nation. Other defenders downplayed Rudy Giuliani's role and told the jurors the president was legitimately concerned about the corruption of the Bidens.
Why did Burisma want Hunter Biden on its board? Why did they want to pay him millions of dollars? Well, he did have one qualification. He was the son of the Vice President of the United States.
Tonight, there are reports the president and his allies are preparing to undermine John Bolton's credibility. President Trump tweeted, I never told John Bolton that the aid to Ukraine was tied to investigations into Democrats, including the Bidens. In fact, he never complained about this at the time of his very public termination. If John Bolton said this, it was only to sell a book. Tonight, the New York Times editorial board offered this headline, Surprise, Mr. President, John Bolton has the goods. Who's telling the truth? There's one way to find out.
If this process is going to have any integrity, and we know there is a witness who is willing and able to tell us what the president said, that witness has got to come forward. And it's not just any random person. It's John Bolton, who was in the White House, who was in the Oval Office, and who, you know, I disagree with many of the things John Bolton has done over his career from a policy perspective, but there's no question that he has served the country and that he would, I think, come before us and speak honestly.
In an exclusive interview, CBS News anchor Norah O'Donnell spoke to 4 House Republicans about John Bolton's book and his potential testimony.
The president's former national security advisor, John Bolton, writes in a new book that the aid to Ukraine was tied to the investigation into the Bidens. Does that contradict the president's defense?
Well, I don't see it as a contradiction, but right now we're commenting on what we believe was leaked to the New York Times, and we've seen this play before.
You don't question the timing of this so-called release. We haven't even seen the book. This is very questionable to me.
Well, tonight there are at least 3 Republican senators, Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski, who said they are interested in calling John Bolton in to testify. Other Republicans are saying if you want it that way, you'll have to let the president's team call witnesses of their own, including Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Now, we'll know more on Friday when the senators are expected to vote on whether any new witnesses will be called at all. But then there will be separate votes on each new witness they want to subpoena. Now, one senator said today, if you go down that path, it could be months before the impeachment trial is over.
Right. Stay tuned. Randy, thank you.